Hello, dear students, and welcome to this introductory lecture on communication skills. In this lecture, today I shall be discussing some of the important aspects related to the topic communication skills. So, to begin, firstly, what is communication? Communication is an act of giving, receiving, and sharing information. It is the process through which we share our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and ideas with others. So the key word here is sharing information. Communication is all about sharing our thoughts, our feelings, our ideas with others. The next important aspect that I shall be discussing is what are the basic elements of communication process. The term communication process refers to the exchange of information or a message between two or more people. For communication to succeed, both parties must be able to exchange information and understand each other. If the flow of communication is blocked due to some reason, then communication fails. The communication process begins with the sender. The sender is also known as the communicator or the source. So the sender is the source. The sender has some kind of information, and so he or she encodes a message in a form that can be understood and then transmits the message. So the sender encodes a message. The sender encodes a message. So after the sender, we have the receiver, the person who receives or interprets the message. So the receiver interprets the message. The receiver first receives the sender's information and then decodes or interprets it. So the receiver decodes the message. So after the sender, the receiver, we have the message. And the message is also known as the content. So the message or the content is the information that the sender shares or transmits. Thus, sender, receiver, and message are the most basic elements in the communication process. And after that, we have the medium. The medium is also known as the channel of communication. So the medium is also known as the channel of communication. It is the means or the method by which a message is transmitted or sent. The medium could be face-to-face, it could be through letters, it could be telephonic conversation, an email, a Facebook post, and so on. And finally, there's the feedback. So the communication process reaches its final or end point when the message has been successfully transmitted, received, and understood. Feedback is the process of ensuring that the receiver has understood the accurate meaning of the sender's message, and with this the communication process comes to an end. So feedback is the final or the end point in the communication process, and with this we come to an end as far as the communication process is concerned. The next important aspect that I shall be discussing is communication models. There are various communication models, but the one that is the most popular model of communication and is also widely accepted all over the world is the Shannon and Weaver model of communication. The Shannon and Weaver model of communication is a linear, it's one-way communication model. And the Shannon and Weaver model was specifically designed by the two American scientists and mathematicians, Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver, in 1948. Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver in 1948. This model was designed to develop the effective communication between sender and receiver. The model was first developed to improve the technical communication, and later on it was widely applied in the field of effective communication. So, the next thing that I would like to discuss is what are the basic elements in this transmission model of communication. The Shannon and Weaver model of communication is also known as the transmission model of communication, and that consists of 5 different elements. So, firstly, an information source. An information source which produces a message. And then we have a transmitter which encodes the message into signals. And after the transmitter, we have a channel to which signals are adapted for transmission. And after the channel, there is a receiver which decodes the message from the signal. And finally, there is a destination where the message finally arrives. We also need to keep in mind that there is a 6th element, and that is noise. It is a dysfunctional factor, any interference with the message traveling along the channel, which may lead to the signal received being different from the one that is sent. So that is due to the noise factor, and that is a dysfunctional factor. And so these are the basic elements in the Shannon and Weaver model. The next aspect of communication that I would like to discuss is what are the different types of communication. As far as the different types of communication broadly concerned, it can be divided into verbal communication, non-verbal communication, and visual communication, where verbal communication can be further subdivided into oral communication and written communication. So, firstly, verbal communication. Verbal communication involves words that we say. Verbal communication occurs when we engage in speaking with others. For instance, a face-to-face communication, or maybe communication over the telephone, or for instance a lecture. These are all examples of verbal communication. Now, oral communication is normally informal in nature, such as chatting with a friend over coffee, or colleagues having an informal chat in the office canteen. While other forms of oral communication may also be more formal, such as conversations that are held in a scheduled meeting, or maybe a lecture that is delivered via Skype or Zoom. And after that, we have, for instance, an email, or maybe a memorandum, a report, or maybe a Facebook post or a tweet. These are all examples of, or all different forms of written communication. So we need to keep in mind that verbal communication is further subdivided into oral communication and written communication. Examples of oral communication: informal chat, or conversations that are held in a scheduled meeting. Written communication, for instance, email, memorandum, report. And after that, we have the non-verbal communication, that is communication without words. Non-verbal communication, where communication takes place but words are not used, without words, wordless communication. It includes facial expressions, tone of voice, postures, gestures, eye contact, touch, and so on and so forth. So these are various aspects, different aspects of non-verbal communication, that is communicating without using words. So after non-verbal communication, we have the visual communication. So a visual communication is a way to communicate ideas graphically in ways that are efficient and help to convey meaning more easily. Some of the common types of visual communication in the workplace includes use of infographics, diagrams, charts, maps, graphs in presentations. So these are all different types of visual communication. So after discussing the different types of communication, the next important aspect is what are the different communication flows in an organization. Communication within a business can involve different types of employees and different functional parts of an organization. These patterns of communication are called flows, and they are commonly classified according to the direction of interaction. So firstly, when leaders and managers, they share information with lower level employees, it's called downward or top-down communication. So the downward communication is also known as the top-down communication. In other words, communication from the superiors to the subordinates is downward communication. This communication flow is usually used by managers to transmit work-related information to the employees at the lower levels. For example, notices, manuals, handbook. So an example, let me highlight here, downward communication, for example, notices. So after downward, what is upward communication? Upward communication is the transmission of information from lower levels of an organization to higher levels. The most common situation is employees communicating with managers or supervisors. The content of such communication can include requests, proposals, complaints, appeals, reports, etc. So let me highlight here an example of upward. It could be in the form of maybe a proposal. So after upward communication, we have the horizontal communication. Horizontal communication is also known as lateral communication, and that involves the flow of messages between individuals and groups on the same level of an organization, as opposed to upward or downward communication flows within in an organization. Communication within a team is a perfect example of horizontal communication. Horizontal communication also occurs formally in meetings as well as in presentations. So an example of horizontal communication, for example, the conversations in a meeting. So after horizontal, we have the diagonal communication or the crosswise communication. Diagonal or crosswise communication is the sharing of information among different structural levels within a business organization. This kind of communication flow is increasingly the norm in any organization today, since cross-functional teams are becoming more common day by day. For example, if the vice president of the sales department, for instance, sends an email to the vice president of manufacturing department or section asking when a product will be available for shipping. So such kind of a conversation or communication is actually a diagonal communication, that is cross-functional. And After diagonal, finally, we have the external communication. So this is another type of communication flow, and here when an organization communicates with people or organizations outside the business. Recipients of external communication include customers, lawmakers, suppliers, and other community stakeholders. Annual reports, press releases, product promotions, financial reports are all examples of external communication. So let me highlight here an example of external communication. For instance, press release. That's an example of external communication. So after the flows of communication, let me discuss about effective communication and the benefits. Effective communication helps to understand a person or a situation in a better way. It enables us to solve the differences, build trust and respect in an organization. It also helps us in the process of decision making. So there are various benefits of effective communication. And now let me discuss an important aspect, that is, what are the common barriers to effective communication? So some of the very common barriers to effective communication are lack of attention and interest, distractions, maybe noise in the environment could be a distraction, physical disabilities, for instance, hearing problems, speech difficulties, and so on, language or linguistic and cultural differences, use of jargons and terminologies that makes the communication process very complicated and not easily intelligible to the layman, expectations and prejudices which may lead to false assumptions in most of the cases, or stereotyping in the mind of the individuals, and finally differences in perceptions and viewpoint. So these are some of the common barriers to effective communication. And so finally, towards the end of the presentation, I would like to discuss the 7 C's of effective communication. What are the 7 C's of effective communication? So the very first C is clear. When writing or speaking to someone, be clear about your message. In order to be clear, one tip is that try to minimize the number of ideas in each sentence. And then the next C is to be concise or precise. We should stick to the point and we should try to keep it brief. The next C is concrete. When your message is concrete, then your audience has a clear picture of what you are telling them. There should be no room for misinterpretation. All facts and figures should be clearly mentioned in order to substantiate whatever you say. The next C is correct, which means communication should be error-free communication. For instance, we should check errors like grammatical errors, punctuation errors, and so on and so forth. And then the next C is coherent. Coherent means whatever we say or write, it should be very logical. All the points are well connected and relevant to the main topic. And the flow of the text is very, very consistent. And after that, the next C is communication should be complete. In a complete message, the audience has everything they need to be informed and, if applicable, even take action. So the communication should be complete, not incomplete. And finally, courteous. Courteous communication is friendly, open, very honest. You should keep your reader's viewpoint in your mind, and we should also try to be empathetic to our audience's needs. So we need to keep in mind that these are the 7 C's of effective communication: clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, and courteous. So, dear students, I hope this lecture would help you in understanding some of the key concepts and aspects related to communication skills. Hope to cover other important aspects of communication soon. Thanks for listening.